isolated queen's pawn on d4. We have reached our structure, so to speak. Bishop d3, this is a very good diagonal for our bishop. Black played bishop e7, castles, castles, and rook e1. Please notice this move is extremely important. We should basically always play this move because it's a very good place for our rook. There are cases where, for example, we are able to go d5, and after e takes d5, the e file is opened up for our rook. So rook e1, essential move in this structure. Black played here knight f6. I'm not completely sure this was a good idea. I know that it's a common move, but I think perhaps he should have considered something like bishop f6. One idea is that after, let's say, bishop e4, black could go knight c e7. And later on, bishop d7, bishop c6. The blockade idea, so to speak. Black is now firmly blocking the isolated queen's pawn. Anyway, in the game there followed knight f6, and white played here bishop g5, which is a good place for the bishop. Another plan for white might have been to play a3, followed by bishop c2 and queen d3, the battery, in order to put some pressure along the b1 h7 diagonal. Anyway, bishop g5 was played in the game, and here black played knight b4. This is a tempting move, however, I'm not sure it was the right choice here. Maybe it was better to play something like knight e5, go back with a knight, because we already discussed this idea of swapping pieces. When we are facing the isolated queen's pawn, we're usually very happy to swap pieces. This might have been a better idea for black. Please notice that we take with this knight so that we protect the fellow knight on d5. Anyway, after knight b4, white, of course, kept this strong attacking bishop, playing bishop e1, and after knight b d5, there followed queen d3. We already know the idea. As you can see, white is already threatening to take on d5, later on take on f6, and to give mate on h7. So black must do something about that. They played here g6. Next, we have a key move for white. As you can see, the knight is no longer on c6. I mean, the black knight has left c6. It went to d5. And that means that now we can install our knight in the center. This is a key move, which is almost always a very good idea in this structure. Black played bishop d7, bishop h6 in order to put more pressure on black on the king side. And after rook e8, white decided that among these weak squares in black's camp, the easiest one to attack would actually be f7. And for that reason, they played here queen f3. Very strong move. As you can see, the knight on f6 cannot move anymore because there is the threat of queen takes f7. There followed in the game bishop c6, knight e4, white brings more pieces to the attack, and after knight b6, we have the very nice pawn move h4. As you can see in this structure, we actually don't move our pawns very much. I would say almost the only two pawn moves which are really interesting for us is either h4, we already know the idea, in order to soften up black's kingside defenses, or perhaps a3, in order to prepare queen b3 without having to care about some knight b4 move. But here this was not needed because the black knight moved to b4 so quickly. Anyway, back to the game, h4 in order to soften up black's kingside by means of h5. Bishop d5 and h5. Rook c8, black brings more pieces to the action, and after h takes d6, a takes d6, white played a nice move, queen f4. The idea is simple. White is unpinning the knight on e4 so that it can move to g5 and attack the pawn on f7. After knight c4 in the game, white took on c4 and went on to win. However, white had a better move here. It's time to strike. With so many pieces in the attack, it's clear that white can go for a direct assault. And that's what white should have played in the game. White could have played knight takes f7, so that after king takes f7, knight g5 check, king g8, as you can see, the pawn on g6 is now undefended, so our bishop will simply take that pawn. And here it's clear that white has too many pieces in the attack for black to be able to survive. Let's try knight e6 in order to cover the f7 square. Maybe white could take on e6, and after bishop takes e6, rook takes e6. In this way, we also get ready to bring the next rook to the action. After rook f8, perhaps queen g5, installing the threat of giving mate with bishop h7 and queen g7. Let's say king h8, perhaps queen h4 in order to create new threats. Black is completely lost here. Only one possible conclusion of the game would be knight h7. And here, as you can see, white could give mate in two moves, right? Bishop g7 check, and after king takes g7, queen takes h7. So this is a perfect display of how we can attack in the isolated queen's pawn structure. Our first plan, so to speak, an attack against the black king. At this point, let's have a look at white's second plan, the d4, d5 break. In this position, perhaps the first move which comes to your mind would be bishop g5, in order to create a threat of bishop takes and queen takes h7. But perhaps in this case, black could defend by means of g6. In the game, white found a much stronger idea. He played here the immediate move d5. It turns out that, tactically speaking, white has a lot of resources here. Black can of course not take with the knight, then it would be mate. So black took with the pawn, and here bishop g5 followed. Now it's a different story because black cannot play g6 anymore. In that case, white would take on e7 with the rook. A simple temporary sacrifice. Black cannot take with the knight or the rook, then he would lose his knight on f6. While if he takes with the queen, as you can see, that would follow knight takes d5. This is an extremely important tactical idea to know of when you play the isolated queen's pawn structure. So d5 was played in the game, then followed e takes d5, bishop g5, black had to play here knight e4, giving back the pawn in order to save their king. However, after queen takes e4, g6, queen h4, white brought more pieces to the attack. After queen c7, we had a very important move here, bishop b3. Please remember this pattern. Once the bishop has fulfilled its task along the b1 h7 diagonal, it's time to shift to the a2 g8 diagonal. This is a very nice diagonal now for the bishop. As you can see, there is the immediate threat of taking on f7 and later on taking on h7. So black had to play here h5. White played queen e4. You can see the threat. The pawn on g6 is defended by the f-pawn, but the f-pawn is pinned, so that means that white is threatening to play queen takes g6. After king g7, the time is right for a sacrifice. White played in the game bishop takes f7. Very nice sacrifice. Now there is the threat of queen takes g6, so black had to take on f6. And here the key move, bishop h6. In this way, white is creating a mating net. There is already 3 different ways in which he can create a decisive attack. Black played in the game bishop d6. In fact, Petrosyan, with the white pieces, had played all this back in 1974. Here white played knight g5 check, and after king f6, the last move of the game was knight h7 check. As you can see here, if black takes with the queen, then the queen is not working on the h2 b8 diagonal anymore, and this means that white could play queen f3 and give mate. While on the other hand, if black plays king f7, well, white would just carry out his main idea here. Queen d5 check and mate next move. Now let's have a look at how we can play against the isolated queen's pawn. We were saying in the beginning that exchanges usually favor the side which is playing against the isolated queen's pawn, and for that reason I'm sure you can find white's next move here, right? Exactly, bishop e3, an excellent move. In this way we're able to swap pieces and eliminate that very strong bishop on b6, because black cannot play bishop c7 here. That would follow bishop c5, and as you can see, black will have troubles with their knights. So in the game, after bishop e3, bishop takes e3, rook takes e3, black played bishop g4, and here white played h3, bishop h5, and another very nice move here. As you can see, the pin is a bit annoying for white, so he played here bishop e2. The bishop was not doing anything on b5 anymore, and in this way white gets ready to play knight e4 in order to swap more pieces. Black tried rook ad8, and that followed just according to the plan, knight ft4. Again, the side playing against the isolated queen's pawn is very interested in swapping pieces. For that reason, black should have played here bishop g6, trying to keep more pieces on the board. If white insists, let's say with bishop h5, we could perhaps play bishop e4 in order to complicate white's plan of swapping pieces. However, in the game, after knight ft4, black instead took on d4, and this just helped white's case here. More pieces were swapped, and as you can see, by now, the pawn on d5 is really weak. And here basically what white did was just to pile up all their pieces against the pawn. They played here after knight takes d4, rook takes d4, queen c6, queen d2, and after rook d6, rook e d3, rook f d8. I'm sure that you by now already know the trick for white, right? Exactly, of course we should play c4 here. The typical tactical trick. In this way, we're actually able to win the isolated queen's pawn, thanks to this pin along the d-file. So in the game, black played h6, and after rook takes d5, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, white just had to make sure that he would choose the right type of endgame. He shouldn't take with the queen, because in that case, actually, the white pawn would soon fall off. So, in the game, the grandmaster instead played here simply c takes d5, and after queen d6, queen d4, centralizing the queen, white was a sound pawn up, and later on went on to win. Summing up, what we have seen here is that white was very eager to swap pieces. A key move in this policy was bishop e3, in order to eliminate that active bishop on b6. Thanks for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave any comment, and see you in the next video.